So I'm here in Antietam National Battlefield, home to, or site of one of the bloodiest battles in American history. And the first stop is a place called Dunker Church, which this is a reconstruction of the church, but apparently this was a focal point of the battle, apparently ironically enough. House of worship, being the focus of battlefield fire. Apparently the original building was blown down in the 1920s, and this was rebuilt, I guess, in the 60s for the centennial of the war. It's not a huge building, not that it would be for 1860s church. And then that's the battlefield behind me. So across the street from the Dunker Church is a line of artillery. Each one's a different model. They got 6-pounders and 10-pounders and 12-pounders, and you can still see the rifling in it, which would have given the round a spin to stabilize it. 5 of them here that apparently were all used in the battle. All right, so we're at stop number 2 on the driving tour. So this part of the battlefield is known for Clara Barton, who arrived at this part of the battlefield to give assistance and aid and help feed the troops and the dying soldiers and wounded. And of course, Clara Barton would go on to found the American Red Cross, so she's pretty well known. So yeah, she would have been walking around this section of the battlefield and helping soldiers. It's pretty cool. And this is near the Joseph Poffenberger farm, which is just ahead of me. So behind me is an area known as the Cornfield, for obvious reasons, but this was apparently the site of some of the worst fighting in one of the worst battles in American history. It's about 24 acres, and the Union and Confederates had a major clash here. And according to the interpretive signs, approximately 8,000 troops were either killed or wounded on this cornfield here, which is horrific by any count. About 25,000 troops were involved in the cornfield battle, and again, 8,000 were killed or wounded. It's insane, kind of, when you really stop and think about what happened here. This rather unassuming cornfield, just the loss of life is, it's astounding, really. And I'm by the West Woods, and this is an area where a division of federal troops came from that direction and were met by Confederate troops ahead of me, and were basically flanked on 3 sides, and we're just decimated. It said 5,000 troops under command of General Sedgwick entered this part of the battle, and 2,200 of them were killed in 20 minutes, which is ridiculous. Yeah, it's hard to comprehend the numbers involved here as far as the dead and wounded. There's one of the cannons. Yeah, 2,220 minutes. It's hard to wrap my head around. So now we're in the Mumma Cemetery, named after the Mumma family, who owned that farm in the background. Most of those buildings on the farm were rebuilt because during the Battle of Antietam, they were actually burned down by the Confederates, who were afraid that that the Union would use them as, a strong point during the battle. So they were burned, and apparently the flames were visible all day during the battle in the smoke column. And this cemetery behind me belonged to the family that owned the farm before the Mummas, and then the Mummas took it over. So some of the stones that we've been seeing are dating from like birth years in the 1700s. The oldest one I've seen so far was born in 1797, I think. So it's old, and the stone wall around it is also historic. Apparently this was built in the 1860s. The Mumma family was also evacuated. Them and their 10 children were evacuated by Union troops because the battle was basically coming right at them. Yeah, it's like very peaceful, tranquil place. And again, like a lot of these historic battlefields, it's all peaceful and tranquil now, but you think of what happened here, and it's crazy, especially Antietam. And the Mumma farm was apparently right in the thick of it. So now we're at a part of the battlefield originally known as Sunken Road, and after the battle was referred to as Bloody Lane. So the Confederates were hunkered down here waiting for an advance from the Unions, and they held them off for a while, but there was more Union soldiers, so they eventually broke down the Confederate line and pushed them back. But apparently there was over 5,000 dead and wounded in this part of the battlefield, and according to reports and even some of the photographs, there's I think 2 photographs of this scene like right after the battle. And this road behind me, they said the dead were laid out like railroad ties and stacked like cordwood. Just horrific scene. And the road is, I don't know if it's naturally sunken, but it wasn't built like this for the battle. It just happened to be advantageous for the Confederates at the time. I think it was just something to do with the farm use of the road as to why it was sunken. But yeah, so there's, and it's not very long either. It's maybe 100 yards in front of me and back to that observation tower you see right there. So there's, over 5,000 dead and wounded just in this little stretch. And there was now over 10,000 troops involved in this part of the battle. Alright, so I'm at the end of Bloody Lane behind me, and just in front of me is the observation tower. Just right there. At first I figured it was a modern construction for the national park, but turns out it's the Army built it in 1896, so it is actually a historic structure. So the bridge behind me is known as Burnside Bridge, named after the Union leader, Ambrose Burnside. Confederate troops were holding this position for a good part of the day before Burnside's troops came along and eventually took the bridge, and which allowed Union forces to cross the creek right here and advance toward the Confederate lines. So we're at our final stop here at Antietam National Battlefield. This is Antietam National Cemetery, where I don't know if it's all of them, but there are thousands of graves here of the soldiers that died during the battle. There's just one of the sections, and all the graves kind of circle around this monument in the background. And they're divided by states. So Pennsylvania has a section, New York, Maryland, Virginia, they all have their own section of the cemetery. And the section I'm walking into now, it's getting kind of dark. It's already past sunset, so it might be hard to see, but these little stones here are of unknown soldiers. And so the number of unknown soldiers' graves outnumber any one state's section. It's looked like a good almost quarter of the cemetery is unknowns, which is really sad. Yeah, so this is one of the few national military cemeteries in the Park Service. Very interesting and sobering trip here to Antietam. Learned a lot and gained a little appreciation for country's history.